Hey everyone, how y'all doing? My name is Mateo and I am from Maschine Masters. Today, I am going to show you 3 of my favorite plugins that I like to use for parallel compression on drums. Now, for those of you that don't know what parallel compression is basically when you take 2 signals that are exactly the same, except one of the signals you apply compression and leave the other one dry. And then what you do is you mix the 2 signals together to find a balance that you like. Now, if you're wondering why you would do this, well, if you think about what compression does, compression tends to reduce dynamic range. So if you want to use this as a pretty extreme effect, you can actually have 2 signals, one that's uncompressed that is very dynamic, and one that is extremely compressed for, say, just a cool sound, and gently bring in that overcompressed sound mixed in with the uncompressed sound to get a really cool sound that you normally wouldn't have been able to get with just one compressor on one version of the signal. Using this technique also helps to increase perceived loudness and maintain dynamics. So the 3 plugins that I'm going to show you today are the VC76 from Native Instruments and Softtube, the Supercharger GT from Native Instruments, and Air's Lo-Fi, which comes free with Protools. Now, these are 3 very different processors, and I love using these 3 depending on the scenario. So I'm going to show you what parallel compression sounds like using these 3 different plugins. First, let's take a listen to these drums that I'm currently mixing. Cool. I really like the way the drums sound. I'm happy with it. However, I really want to emphasize the kick and the snare a little bit more and add a little character to them. So first I'm going to play you 3 different versions of what the parallel compression sounds like on its own, and then I'm going to play them one by one with the rest of the drums. First up, we have the VC76, which is an emulation of the very famous compressor 1176. This compressor is really awesome on drums because it responds very quickly to fast transients. This means it'll capture basically everything that you throw at it. It is very effective and it's great for drum destruction, which is typically what I like to use it for. So first, let's listen to the kick and snare without any of this processing. Now let's listen to it with the VC76. It has a very different sounding character now because I am compressing it so much that it's picking up all the ambience that's in the samples, which is a really cool effect. Now remember, these are meant to be exaggerated, at least in the way that I use them, because I like how it changes the character of the samples. Next up, we have the Air Lo-Fi. So this is basically like a bit reducer, sample reducer, and has some really cool saturation effects built into it. I mainly use it for the saturation, and I really like how it downgrades the audio. So let's listen to the dry signal without any processing. Now let's listen to what I did with Air Lo-Fi. It sounds very dirty and very lo-fi, which I love. Last but not least, we have Supercharger GT from Native Instruments, which is actually the plugin that I used in this particular track for the parallel compression. So let's listen to the unprocessed kick and snare again. Great. Now let's listen to what I did with Supercharger GT. Now, with the Supercharger GT, I kept the kick and the snare sounding a little closer to the original. I definitely squashed the signal quite a bit. I added quite a bit of subharmonic emphasis and added a little bit of saturation to it as well. So these three plugins are usually my go-to for parallel processing on drums, but they sound vastly different and work in vastly different ways. Now let's listen to the whole drums with the three various parallel compressions in it, just to hear how they affect the signal. Now, I'm going to be introducing the various parallel compression tracks in a very subtle amount. So you're not going to hear it as if it's a big change. It's going to be more subtle. However, you will hear a difference in the kick and the snare, and each of these will have a different sound character. So pay close attention. So that right there was the 1176. Next, we've got the Air Lo-Fi, and I'm going to bring it in halfway through just like I did with the 1176. Great, and next is the Supercharger GT. Now, when we played those back and we're listening to each of those examples, you noticed that the kick and the snare definitely started popping out more. Now, between the three different parallel processes, they each had their own slightly different sound character. And what I mean by that is that each of the kicks and snares sounded slightly different. I found that the VC76 brought out more of the ambience. So the ambience in the samples, it made it sound a little more lively, as if there was a little more room in it. With the Air Lo-Fi, it seemed to emphasize the low mids and mids. And with the Supercharger GT, it sounded like the top end was a little brighter and the subharmonic frequencies were stimulated more. So there's quite a bit that you can do in regards to sculpting and adding more character to the sounds of your kicks and snares, especially if you're working off of samples. So the next time you're trying to add a little more character to your drums, maybe try playing around with some different compressors or saturation plugins in parallel with your drums, and you might be surprised with some of the cool sounds that you'll get. Oh, and if any of you have these three plugins or any of them, they are really fun to play with, so I highly recommend them. Thanks again to all of you that checked out this tutorial. We really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about what we covered in this tutorial, please feel free to leave it in the comment section below. Also, if you have any suggestions for future tutorials, also leave that in the comment section below. As always, please like and share this video and subscribe to Maschine Masters to keep up with all our latest tutorials. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.